morning, welcome back and thank you for staying with us. This is Daybreak and the hashtag on X is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. We are now joined by Mwalimu Omboko Milemba, the lawmaker representing Emuhaya constituency and the national chairperson of the Kenya Union of Post-Primary Education Teachers. Good morning.
Good morning.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
And thank you for having...
I'm very happy to see my friends here.
And people who you have said you were in the trenches together, mentioning Susion for that matter.
Of course. Very well.
Thank you. Dr. Muga was on you before we went on a break, and I'll get your thought here, Mwalimu Milemba. The question about the justice we have talked about and the categorization of schools in this regard. I mean, generally then, does our education system speak to our needs as a society?
For me, that's the main issue, because when government is involved in accentuating and aggravating inequality, then something is very wrong. Because when you go to the health sector, when a patient goes to the dispensary and they cannot handle that case, they escalate all the way up to the referral hospital. Mm-hmm. Now, in the education system, when you get these marks in KCPE, largely failed by the system, because no one holds schools to account for failing children. You are sent to a sub-county school, which is a government school. Another person goes to a national school. The quality assurance that is meant to improve quality focuses on the national schools, because that's where stakes and our children are as a privileged people. But those that go to sub-county schools, actually, no focus is on them. So for me is, how do we get government to be accountable to every student? Because that's what government is for. If government is there to sustain inequities, then we are dealing with a very serious problem. So I think for me, the issue is schools where no students have failed, I think is where we should be, have passed, is where we should be focusing on. What are the issues? And we know those issues. We know that there are schools that don't have enough teachers, and maybe because of certain reasons. Mm-hmm. We are seeing places like Garissa and Mandera where girls constitute only a third of the schooling population. So for me, I think this education is not serving society the way it should, and we have been running away from the issues, discussing A's here and not discussing E's. Okay. We are focusing now on COOPs and the 22%, and not talking about the 78%. And especially the East now, who also constitute a significant percent.
5.33%.
Yeah. So what are we saying? You know, when we say that we are commissioning a study on the East, we've always said East. We know why a student gets E from a school. So how do we now address these issues in the education system holistically and seriously?
Mwalimu Milemba, coming to you. Yesterday, the Teacher Service Commission CEO Nancy Macharia had also expressed herself on this matter, and talking about the introduction of extra class in 2024 grade 8 at the junior schools level, and says that there is a deficit in that regard of 42,117. What's required is 99,045. What's so far available is 56,928. It seems that we are far from bridging the teacher deficit, in spite of the huge allocation that the Ministry of Education has, accounting for 28% of the country's national budget. Still, these deficits are a perpetual problem that are unable to be addressed by the ministry.
Very well, thank you, and thank you for welcoming me to the show. One, let me congratulate all the candidates who sat for the KCSE exams, and also congratulate the teachers who worked to make sure that we get these results. Remember, this is the COVID class of 1919. Yeah. And there were so many challenges all the way up to the time they have started for exams. Also, all the players in the sector. Also, I want to reiterate to the government that I saw something very good, that the examiners have been paid. You know, how many times have I come here to just look for and try to highlight the plight of examiners who usually are paid after 1, sometimes 2 years, but this time the examiners have been paid, and I'm very proud of that. But back to your question of the shortage of teachers in schools, this has been a perennial problem which we have carried along. But I want to congratulate the current government to the extent that now we are employing a good chunk of numbers of teachers in the schools. Because formerly, I would remember, would employ 5,000 teachers. There would be 2,500 for primary and maybe 2,000 for secondary. And within a cycle of 5 years, would employ 5 times 5, which was 25,000 teachers. But this time, we have had a significant improvement of employing up to 55,000, 56,000 teachers in a year, though I know there's the challenge of the interns who are in the sector. If you'll give me a question on that, I think I'll be speaking on it. But now that the Teacher Service Commission and the government is setting aside more money to employ teachers to try and bridge the gap is good enough. I'm looking forward that within the next 2 years we shall have bridged the gap, because if we can do 30,000, we shall be able to bridge the gap of 99,000 teachers. The challenge we have is that majority of them are interns, and they are now crying outside there for P&P. But I think that will also be sorted out so that we have enough number of teachers in schools to teach both our primary, the junior school, and the secondary school. The real place where the rubber meets the road are the teachers. Many of the schools which I've heard even my brother talk about, the sub-county schools and the county schools, why they are performing poorly is that they don't have teachers. Some of them don't have science teachers. And if you do a spot check of their performance in sciences and mathematics and physics, you'll find that the performance is very, very, very poor. So we need more investment there. Teacher Service Commission, being a constitutional commission, needs to come to Parliament and actually ask for more money from the Education Committee. And in Parliament, I and many others are pushing that more money be put in the sector of education, because education is a right and you cannot run away from it. It is not something that you'll wish away. So more money for employment of teachers.
Okay, beyond the investment that is required, which you bill as very key, shouldn't there be also a focus on now the teachers themselves who are required to change from norm reference to criterion reference because of the system now we are getting into, and of course now we have taken off the runaway, and therefore the need to retool them to be now criterion referenced. I mean, then do you think the clarion call of you seeking more funds for teachers in this regard will be hard, and do you think there will be an increment to that effect?
Constitution is the responsibility of the government to provide education. And basic education is a right to every child. And it must be not only just accessible, but also compulsory. So then it dawns upon the government that it must invest heavily in education. And many other countries are doing so. And therefore, there's no escape route for our government. You know, I'm a member of also the Kenya Kwanza government that we must invest in education. And I must encourage the government to invest more in education in order to have every other teacher who is supposed to be in school to be in the school. Now, let me come back to what you said. Part of the budget allocation that should be given by Parliament, and which we are willing to give, and which I, in particular, keep on agitating for, is for the retooling of the teachers. Because I know we are moving from the 844 system to the CBC system, and therefore retooling of these teachers is very important. And a budget allocation for that particular purpose cannot be wished away because that is the way to go. I was there when we had A-level. I'm an old school myself. I'm a BBC production. Is it BCC? And before computers. And therefore, I know the teachers who taught A-level are the same teachers who have taught 844. But all they need is retooling. So once we can do retooling for them and government has to give that particular money, then we should be able to have our CBC proceed properly.
Yes, what about seniors?
Yeah, I think we've discussed the general issues trying to vacate the issue of examination, but I think we should speak now specifically to the figures. What does it mean and what must be done, which of course is what Dr. Mugo was talking about. If you look at the spread, the curve, at the very bottom, 48,000 is, and 165,000 D minus, 155,000 Ds, and if you total that number, it's about 400,000. That is half the candidature.
Who sat for the exam?
Yeah, who sat for the exam. Okay. And if you compare from the other end, are 1,000 1,216. So it's not balancing. You compare 1,216 at the very end and 48,000, that is not balancing. In previous exams, because we are coming from a history of examinations, before these reforms were brought in haphazardly in 2016, coupled with the stoppage of examinations cheating, the number of A's were around 10, 15,000. It is rather around 10, 15,000, and A's were about 3,000. Those are the numbers that we have. It was almost a near normal curve. So indeed, this curve is a cause for worry in this country.
And how can that be
when you have the 48,000 as a huge, significant number. Now, way forward, and this boils down to the issue of quality that we are talking about. Unless we invest in areas of quality, and there are three variables that we must invest in. It is not new. It will not require anything empirical to be discussed tomorrow. It's empirical today. It has been empirical in the past. Investment in teachers for every school, not national schools. Don't tell us about categorization. That is promoting discrimination and inequity. And I'm happy in the presidential working report, this categorization of schools has been abolished, so that a school is a school. And that school must have a teacher, qualified teacher in the classroom all the time. If you check schools that have posted grades A, they've gone an extra mile to hire BOM teachers. I can give example of Tenwek High School, where I studied, where I taught, and where I have interest. Out of 100 teachers in the staff room, 50 teachers are employed and paid by the Board of Management, and they do a lot of job. So you can imagine the payroll, additional payroll that the school management has gone to pay more teachers. Number two, investment in quality teaching and learning tools. So let's not talk about teachers without talking about teaching and learning tools, quality infrastructure. If you look at these schools that are doing very well, they put up quality laboratories, quality teaching and learning tools, and students are learning in decent environment. And then generally, the school's infrastructure is key. Those are key variables. But then when you come to the action points, which Dr. Mugo is talking about, who should do this? Quality assurance and standards. And I think today, once the results are released, we must have a quality assurance and standard report of every school, so that we know the status of teachers' requirement, the status of teaching and learning resources, the status of infrastructure, and also school leadership. School leadership, it is the leadership. And then now, that brings me to Teacher Service Commission. What must TSC do? Don't tell us about the number that you're employing. Tell us then, whom have you appointed to lead the schools? We must appoint meritoriously the most effective and efficient head teachers to head these particular schools. And in this environment where results have been released, how many teachers have we seen being rewarded for doing well? The president has reinstated both direct and indirect promotions. Direct promotion means teachers are promoted directly on the basis of doing very well, either in class or outside class. Those who excel in co-curricular activities are promoted directly. I would expect, and I expected then, Teacher Service Commission yesterday to lay out a plan that those teachers who have done very well in this cohort of exams will be automatically promoted. Those are things, motivating factors, rewards, and therefore there's a lot to do. But then the most key thing, the take home for the ministry and for the CS, so that the CS does not only direct investigation for the cause of the 48,000. We need proper reports and proper reviews by quality assurance and standards for each and every school and the way forward. If that is done, then we'll see these numbers changing. And within the framework of quality assurance, even the grading system will be an item for discussion over the years and reorganization of teaching and learning. So that then, when we meet as this panel next year, we'll be talking about a positive deflection from Dr. Muga. You've said it is 22%. I've said it is around 25%, but it is up from 19%, and the trajectory is upward. But I think a lot of work being done by the ministry, revolutionary
Asante.
We don't need to do things as status quo. And I think, Ayub, you will invite us for this discussion today, close the chapter, invite us again next year, and nothing has been done in school.
Thank you.
I think we call upon the ministry to engage in revolutionary approach. And I think that's what they're doing now, to deal with the mess of the yesteryears and to set the education sector on a positive trajectory, which the ministry has done, which the government has done. A lot of work must be done in the course of the year, Dr. Mugo, so that we see a change.
Yes, Dr. Mugo, coming to you then. Sosion talks about the context of more teachers who are needed for employment, bringing them on board. And yesterday there was the clarification to that effect made by the Teacher Service Commission CEO, and also the question of the transition to grade 9 here, the junior secondary schools, and the more than 12 billion meant to construct more than 15,000 classrooms. Whilst there seems to be a focus on the hardware bit, is there also a concern that the software aspect is being forgotten here, which is the welfare and the payment, proper remuneration of the teachers themselves, who in most aspects are concerned about what they get at the end of every month?
Yeah, and that's a very good question, Ayub. My frustration from where I sit as a Kenyan is that we get very little information from government. I know government in its design plans long term. But what we get is now just this moment, what we are doing this year. So one of the questions, and you said very well, Ayub, that Kenya actually is among, it could be the top African country in terms of allocating money to the education sector. And I must congratulate government, parliament for this. So the money as we stand now in our economy may not be more. So the question is, how are we optimizing the resources that are available? There are two questions that are always addressed when it comes to teachers. One is the numbers, and the other one is the salary. There are questions that we don't have answers for. For instance, workload. We know for primary school it's easy because every teacher can be sent to every class to teach a subject. For secondary school, the question is, of the teachers that are in secondary schools, how many are optimally utilized? And do we need reskilling for some teachers who have a low workload to teach more? Because employing more teachers is a budgetary issue, and it may not always be possible. But how are we optimizing also the workforce that is there? The other question, next year, we'll have no Form 1. In 2025. So we will have teachers in secondary schools because now we'll be moving from 4 classes to 3 classes. So how many teachers do we expect in 2025 to shift? So that then we are having holistic. So as a researcher, I feel honestly very frustrated because I'm here discussing, I don't have information. I know this information is somewhere, but it's not being released. So what are we supposed to do as Kenyans to contribute? To the development of education. So for me, I know that there is a lot of resource within, and that resource just needs to be planned for in a longer term way, but also unlocked in certain ways, like looking at teacher distribution, for instance, as an issue across schools. We know there might be schools that are overstaffed, while others are understaffed. The other question, Ayub, we know that Parliament, through CDF, has been even constructing new schools and so on. What is likely to happen when now we move from a secondary school of 4 years to a secondary school of 3 years? Have we stopped constructing new schools? As a matter of policy, and how is the balance going to be between the money that we are putting into some secondary schools and junior secondaries? Are there going to be some secondary schools that will have no students when we move to 3 years that should become junior schools? So when you look at all this, I mean, we don't have the information, and if we continue to plan short term, then we keep struggling and underutilizing certain resources.
Yes, Mwalimu.
Thank you, Dr. Mungu, and you have actually created more gaps, which is very good for us to actually see if they can be filled. Number one, on the teachers themselves, the challenge we have is the shortage of the teachers. And it needs to be actually addressed. But above all is the motivation of the teachers. And that's where we come in as unions, that it has not been very easy for ourselves. to push government to motivate the teachers enough. The motivation of teachers is based on several areas: promotion. Recently, I want to thank the government because there was 55,000 teachers being promoted. But even as this is being done, we have the interviews going on. Today, there'll be interviews going on up to, I think, Friday. Not all teachers who are supposed to be promoted are going to be promoted. We are promoting just about 36,000. Earlier on, they had promoted 14,000, taking the number to about 50. But the teachers who really actually are qualified for promotion are more than 100,000. And therefore, not all the teachers are going to be promoted. And this is because a promotion has been stopped for the longest period of time. And therefore, teachers are not motivated. There's the second issue of the salaries and the CBS, which we are also struggling with as unions and also as parliament. And the motivation of teachers in terms of salary has not been very good. Whereas we were able to receive 7 to 10% pay increment, but the teachers were looking forward to, we were looking forward to a 30-70 pay increase. And therefore, the issue of motivation of taking care of the teacher is a real problem. And like Sosion and both Mugo talked about, they are not seeing the teacher being flagged out as an item in this performance. But then going on to the issue of optimization of the resources in terms of human resources, the teachers themselves, I think, Dr. you are right to some extent. I took it upon myself. I removed my coat of just being a trade unionist and being a parliamentarian. And I wrote to the president just about that. I was trying to, and not just the president, I wrote to everybody else who needed to be written to, that in the year coming ahead, I think that's 2025, we shall not be having Form 1, and we shall have a chunk of teachers who will actually be in the second schools who have been teaching Form 1. And not only just the chunk of teachers, we shall also have resources. We shall have physical facilities in terms of classes. We shall have infrastructure in terms of toilets, and for the boarding schools in terms of space for the Form 1 class. That wouldn't we think of just moving this class to that particular class to secondary level, because after all the school is supposed to be one unit, so that we actually optimize on the use of resources. And I think people are looking at it within the ministry and within government. And if it can work, it should work well for ourselves, so that we are not having a situation whereby we are not fully optimizing our resources, despite the fact that we also don't have enough money to do that. And therefore, I think another challenge affecting the teachers currently, like the ones in the junior second school, we are announcing employment of more teachers. But the ones who are there are on temporary terms, what we call the interns. So they are not happy and they have been agitating. We have been talking to government. We have been given a promissory note that during the second supplementary budget, they'll be absorbed as PPP. But in my opinion, they should have been absorbed fast so they can work, motivated that they are doing their work very well. Because if we go on employing more interns and not confirming them into PPPs, then we are actually casualizing education, despite the fact education is actually the prime business of government. I saw a very big argument recently yesterday about the 48 E's and why government... 48,000 E's, and why government still is not bothered, and whether the government is wasting money to actually still take these students to the second schools and get the 48,000 E's. The business of education for government is different. If you go back to the Todarian model of economics, in economics of education, education has benefits that are both to the individual and to the public. And the government's interest mainly, the individual benefits may be the A you get and the B plus you get, but the government is more than that, because it's investing in education in order to produce a citizen who can also participate in government, participate in democracy, make decisions, blah, 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 and so on and so forth. So whereas we shall be interrogating the issue of the 48 E's, let's not look at it that there was a policy mistake in terms of 100% transition for everybody to go to second school. After all, by the Constitution itself and by law, basic education is defined as from ECD to...
I'll come to Honorable Sosion. But Mwalimu Mwelemba, given what you have mentioned, I mean, the case of cheating and then boiling down to integrity and the passion for good grades which pushes these candidates to the border, then how should our education system work for us in the context of poverty reduction, human development, prospect of decent jobs, and broader socio-economic developments as a society?
Very good, a very technical question. You know, education has been changing since time immemorial. At 1963, the main focus was on creation of people who could take up jobs that were being left by the colonial masters and Europeans who had been the civil service and government. Mm-hmm. And therefore, if you look at the commissions that were there during that particular time, and even the system itself was clogged towards producing human resource. And I think we are some of the products of that education system up to the A-level time. But now, later on, we have so many people in the field, and therefore the access to white-collar jobs is not always a guarantee. And the education system must completely change so that it now befits the society, which has now changed. We no longer need those people in employment. At the same time, we need people to get jobs that will actually contribute to the industry and contribute to poverty reduction, the way you're putting it. And that's why, possibly, I am a great supporter of CBC. Even when that argument used to be there, I stuck with CBC for the fact that the education system is now changing to prioritize production of skilled labor. And therefore, even as these results come out, and I walked in while we were talking about the A's, the A's is just a small chunk of this. The majority of these students, 700,000 are going to TVETs, and that's where we need to put more money. And those are the guys who will come out with skills to actually practice. And we must remove the kasumba, allow me to use that word, that when you leave school, the TVETs, you'll be employed in a company and be paid 36,000 or a certain amount. These are guys who must now get into the field and work in many places, the way it's happening in America, so that you are working in many places and the number of hours of working are even higher, so that it can benefit the society, reduce poverty, and actually enhance families.
Yes, what about Soso?
Yeah, I think we can discuss on and look at many aspects in terms of relating to the economy, what we are now. But I think if you look at Vision 2030, we should not depart from Vision 2030, that Kenya must produce the most globally competitive human resource. It will be done through the education system. I don't think when you have 50% of the candidature in an examination of this nature, scoring D and below, I don't think we are walking that direction. And what is key here is that we must focus on the specific gaps and agree and work in a productive manner. A lot has been said about the inputs into the education and output. Right now we are discussing the input, and then others are still debating about the we are discussing about the output, others are still debating about the inputs. If we look at it, in terms of funding, Kenya has met almost a global minimum. 6% of the GDP funding to education, and 28% in the overall budget. In terms of teacher recruitment, let us be honest, Kenya is trying. And if you look at what Kenya Kwanza is doing, it's trying to bridge the identified gap of 116. It has done 56,000. What is remaining is 54,000. And a further 20,000 will be employed. This is a grand plan by Kenya Kwanza. And all these teachers who have been absorbed on interns shall be automatically converted. And I think Omboko knows it very well, so that it's not an item of debate. It's a matter of Omboko and team to sit with TSC and agree on the framework of conversion so that resources are availed. But now the question is, what accountability structures do we have in place to ensure that, one, these limited resources, because resources are always limited, are giving us optimum output.
You mean our resources in terms of if they were planned
in terms of funding, and even in terms of human resource. I've seen arguments.
Okay, what if this hypothesis, Honorable Sosion, because the general consensus, I'm sure, on this desk, Dr. Mugo, Mwalimu Milemba, and you, is that if we cap corruption as a country, then we can have more resources channeled to critical sectors like education.
And now that brings me to one item. Before we talk about capping corruption in the entire government, can we also deal with the wastages, even within the education sector itself, so that then as resources are channeled in, it gives us optimum output. I want to state very clearly here that the exams must provide 100% transition of all learners to the next level, so that then Umboko here, we should not be talking of, the 700 to go to TVET. At the universities, the spaces available at the universities are over 300,000. And those who have qualified are 200,000. Are we saying this cohort cannot supply C+ and above over 300,000? They should. And this one must be done through proper, and that is why this grading system has changed. It has not given us the outcome that we wanted. It should give us moving forward. So the question is, what should we do for them in simple language? Yeah. What should we do as a country and as a ministry within the next 1 year? That is why I've recommended, one, for us to identify those gaps, for us to put the accountability structures in place, for us to weed out corruption and wastages within schools, and we look at it school by school. Let us not focus only on national schools, counties, extra county. We need to have clear accountability structures in every institution, both in terms of utility of money and human resources, in terms of leadership, and in terms of teaching and learning. All those things must be in place. And that brings me to one overall item. We can discuss so many things, but then if we don't have a quality assurance standards in place, then you'll never identify these gaps. And this quality assurance and standard must work at the school level. We must have reports. And this is, Dr. Mugo here will agree with me. I don't think there's any school in this country, and I dare challenge the ministry, that can produce an inspection report about the status of the school. These schools that have done very well on their own, based on their own cultures and on their own programs.
Thank you.
But I am sure if we strengthen, and if you look at the Basic Education Act, it recommended in 2012 the establishment of Quality Assurance and Standard Council. And all governments in the world, there's an inspectorate unit.
Thank you.
That and inspectors or quality assurance and standard officers are made up of exemplary teachers, and they're free to visit every classroom and to visit teachers throughout. This is how you fix gaps.
Okay, thank you.
Don't wait until 1 year, then you identify general challenges, and we only prosecute in the media space.
Okay.
Let all these gaps be prosecuted at the school level. And I do challenge that then every school in this country, whether county, sub-county, extra county, should be able to take time to review their results, identify their unique gaps within the schools, and see how it can be fixed. And I think this will be facilitated by proper leadership at the ministry. And now is the time, other than talking about so many things, we need the quality assurance and standard department fully operational and delivering.
Thank you, Honorable.
And so that on minute-to-minute basis, these gaps can be fixed in school.
Thank you.
And if they are fixed, then next year we'll have a different story here.
Okay. Dr. Mugo, coming to you. I mean, because now we are fully into this new system of the competency-based curriculum, and teachers are expected practically to switch from the role of being an expert to that of being a facilitator, for example, who guide the learning process in the context of the learners and the engagement which ought to be happening. But then again, they need to be trained and retooled. And do you think that our universities are prepared to train these teachers and who are going to implement the competence-based curriculum?
Yeah, it's a big question. I know universities are not prepared. I know that they are just starting now to warm up to CBC and to figure out how to do this. And one of the things, the tragedies of the system, is that we started implementing CBC in 2016. We never shifted teacher training. When you go to a university randomly, Maseno or Kenyatta, that are training thousands of teachers, they never changed the curriculum to align to CBC. So we have continued for many years producing teachers who will now have to be retrained. So I think we are in a system of always in a survival mode, and so wondering always about in-service when we have ignored pre-service, and pre-service being actually the easiest way of creating the future. So that's I think a mistake that happened. I know universities now are trying to align to CBC, but you see, how are we retooling the university lecturers? Because they are used also to teaching and lecturing in a certain way to a certain people. The way we were taught is the way we teach. now in 5 years, you know, they will receive now students that have been taught in a different way. So I think that retooling program for the university is urgent and ought to have happened. And one of the things is that we focus a lot on the university, and I agree with Honorable Milemba that we focus on the university, which will take now 20%, because there is a percentage actually of students that are qualified for university that will opt to go to TVET. Yeah. And we have seen that number increasing. So if we say hypothetically that 20% will go to the university, then we are seeing that a lot of the conversation and investment is focused on 20% and not the 80%. So the one thing I disagreed with Honorable Milemba is that while the colonial government exited, we continued with colonialism, because Honorable Sosion, there are schools in this country that are visited by quality assurance once a term or more. And there are others that are not visited
at all
in 5 years, even not once.
At all.
So colonialism actually has been perpetuated by the system.
Worse.
National schools are favored. We are here. If you look at the papers and you look at who we are celebrating, there are those schools that are focused on by quality assurance, and there are reports. If you ask for a report about Alliance,
they'll give you.
They'll give you. If you ask for a report about a certain school that is 30 miles off the tarmac, they won't have any report. That school has not been visited. So how do we say that there is no colonialism in the system? So while the purpose of education shifted, the mechanisms of delivery actually never shifted, so that aspect of justice, how do we get government to commit? Honorable Milemba, to the 48,000 is because those have not come from national schools, we know. They have not come from extra-county schools. We know which schools they have come from. So who is responsible? Now, the question you asked, Ayub, for me, I think when this kind of exams, because we were born, we got exams, as Honorable Sosion said, or exams that are non-reference. We have grown up with them, they are there. So when now the exams exist, like now we released KCP and we discussed a lot about KCP. We don't even know about KCSE.
It's not out.
And whether those children learned that did grade 6 or they didn't learn.
Okay.
So what is going to happen to the accountability mechanism? Because exams have served a very serious accountability issue. Yeah. There are teachers now, head teachers, that are going to be chased away by parents because they failed their children. So what will happen when we don't get information about whether learning is happening or is not happening? Yeah. That shift to the now criterion referencing, I think, is a major question. Yes. And we don't know whether education quality actually will now take a dip in the new era.
And to that effect, before I go to Mwalimu Milemba, there is this feedback from Honorable Nabi Nabwera, who is a member of the Education Committee and watching this broadcast from Eldoret. And to that extent, he says, is then therefore the 48,000 is an indictment of the failure of the quality assurance standard departments in the ministry in supervising the curriculum delivery? And
I'll say yes.
It is the responsibility can be distributed to many factors. That would be one of them, or one of it. But you cannot just leave it at the level of quality assurance. It's true, and I heard Honorable Sosion speak on quality assurance for the longest time in this particular show. And he's right, because him and I have been there when quality assurance was very strong. The quality assurance of Brother, the late steamer, the quality assurance of the veteran Oyaya, the quality assurance that was in the ministry up to a certain time before it actually disappeared was heavy. And, you know, we would see it on the ground, would feel it on the ground. Currently, the quality assurance is not as thorough as it used to be. And
it
therefore,
doesn't exist.
And therefore, thank you. And therefore, if it is strengthened, that would be one of the reasons for this. But away from this, also, it would be because of the fact that we were mopping up all the students to finish the system of 844, and everybody was supposed to be there. I know, I've been in this business for quite some time.
Yeah.
I know there are students who could have been repeating classes and being left behind. They were all now mobbed to go in. There are students who had fallen out of school and they were being left out. They were convinced to get back to school, and many, many other factors. We had the challenges of COVID. We have the shortages of teachers, as I've talked about. Most of these E's are coming from our CDF schools, the sub-county schools, where there are no teachers, there are no proper infrastructure. So it's a combination of factors. And for me, yesterday, when I was speaking on this, I said, for us to know how to move forward, it's not bad for us to inquire that why did we go this low? Because it will inform the researchers like Dr. here and even the teachers ourselves to know that this is what to do, given that the numbers were very high. I think the last time we had this high number of E's may have been 2014 thereabout. Yeah. But still, even this number is about 20,000 higher than what it was that particular time. So it's a cause for alarm, and I would say that. Yeah. Number two, on Daktari, you are venturing into an area which will require a little bit longer time to speak on in terms of colonialism and neo-colonialism, not neo-colonialism, but colonialism after colonialism. But my perspective of that question was not necessarily the continuation of those systems you are talking about. And we can multiply it into other sectors, some of them very dangerous, land ownership and so on and so forth. For me, I was only focused on the intention of what the intention of education was. The intention of education was to produce labor, human resource, to fill up the gaps being left by those colonialists.
Thank you.
And then it changes later on. Yeah. So I wouldn't want to go there a little too much. But let me even indicate that as we speak about these exams, there are also other exams. I was very happy when we talked about KCSE, which has not been released, and the students are looking.
In a week's time, that is the communication yesterday given by CS Machogu. Yeah, in a week's time, you said.
It should be out.
Outcome should be ready.
Because you see, if a student is living in Nairobi and is joining my village school or school elsewhere, he needs to show that he had done exactly that exam, and that would be important. But then something else that we are actually supposed to deal with is the fact that there was also those 2,000 students. I wouldn't leave this show without talking about...
To go to Form 1.
To go to Form 1. Yeah. And I wouldn't leave this show without talking about the 3,000 students who are not there.
3,600.
And I had my colleagues speak on that in terms of optimization. The over 3,000 students who did not sit for exams, and the 9,000 students who never sat for KCPE. We have to build these things and put them together. We really also must inquire. As we inquire into the 48 E's, we need to inquire where are those students. Because there has been also our feeling that sometimes our teachers are accused that they are the ones who are inflating these numbers. But us from the teaching fraternity here and the representative, we believe that this thing is choreographed within the ministry. That there are people within the system of government who are owning schools in the air, non-existing schools. And also this is a matter that should be put under investigation. So that we know that because we have been trying to track the 9,000 students who did not appear for KCPE, we have been only able to track about 2,000. And that's why the ministry was saying that, okay, we cannot have a national exams for this group of people. Yet capitation went to these guys. Those are issues that for us, we need to also follow. And that also rounds up with over 3,000 students who cannot be traced up so that we actually optimize, in our own words, the resources in this place. But then it comes further to policy. Policy becomes very important in any system, and we cannot bananize the education system so that at one time we can just have 2,000 students and say these ones will go to Form 1.
Thank you.
Without KCPE, because one of the items required to enter Form 1, apart from a box, is a slip showing your KCPE results. So I don't know how these ones will walk into school and what it means.
Thank you. And I'll come to you also soon. Yesterday in the speech by the Cabinet Secretary, it pointed that out, saying that there could be the possibility of wastage of public funds since the government pays examination fees for candidates based on the data submitted by schools, then tasking the directorate to look into the matter with also the Kenya National Examination.
And that is why I've talked
your point, then we sample the feedback.
Yes, and that is why I'm talking about accountability structures. If we don't have quality assurance in place, we also don't have a strong school audit unit so that it audits all these. Now we are seeing ghost figures. The biggest challenge for Machogu as he reforms the ministry is to put in place strong accountability structures so that we don't have figures that cannot be accounted for. But as for now, because of the human phase and human need, the 2,000 students transiting to Form 1 is not a tragedy at all, because they'll be subjected to evaluations to validate the same. And we've argued in the past whether these KCPE exams really mandatory. And some of us in the past recommended the abolition even of KCPE. Now we are crying for KCSE. KCSE has been downgraded to an evaluation exam that would validate, and it's not going to be used for admission of students to grade 7. So they automatically move in with or without, but they will get their results. But going into the future, because then we must consolidate all these conversations and focus on the future. One, the Ministry of Education is trying to reorganize the entire sector and put it on a trajectory that is not going to give us laborers, but is going to revolutionize and industrialize the country. In the fourth industrial revolution and in the era of manufacturing and value addition. And that is why we need to strengthen STEM education. And therefore, in these reforms, the structure that has been reformed, one, the comprehensive school system from PP1 to grade 9 must be strengthened. And therefore, I would advise those trying to say, oh, there will be space in secondary schools next year, so can we have grade 9 taken to secondary school? No, let senior secondary school remain senior. And I would like to state that even preparation for senior, you will realize it's a bigger problem. Dr. Mugo, if we want to performing arts in every school in the country, and performing arts means music, it means all those other subjects. Have we trained enough teachers for that? We have not.
Thank you.
And therefore...
Which therefore then means that there must be actionable points for the ministry.
I think the bigger problem in progressing the education and CBC is even the availability of human resource at senior secondary level. And I would like to urge my colleagues here, get out of those semantic arguments and let's get down to realistic facts guided by data. And I think the ministry has done very well in trying to bring in these reforms. The structure that is in place, can we make it work? And then let us have it work.
Let's now get the feedback and what our viewers are saying on the X handle at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir, who have been part of this discussion since morning. Remy Butia says the ultimate success of Kenya's education system will be measured by its ability to give equal access to all candidates and provide qualified skills into the labor market to drive the economy. Congratulations, my alma mater, Kemeloi boys. Bob Otieno Wino says the education sector is in a mess, especially for those who are to join grade 9. There is no proper infrastructure to accommodate them, as there are masses just about to join grade 7. We were not ready for the competency-based curriculum.
No, we must be.
Remy Buti again says most of the problems within the education sector stem from the general increase in poverty levels and inequalities across the country. In my view, first, solve the problems outside the classroom, then go inside the classroom. Okelo Mwalimu says, I take the opportunity to congratulate our star, that is of Kariobangi North Girls Secondary, who did their best in 2023 KCSE. Special recognition to Brant Alonda and Prudence Ombima for the worthy efforts. I wish them all the very best in the next phase of their education. Samuel Award says there are various parameters that affect KCSE performance, and for 2023 candidate class, COVID-19 broke out and the 10-week terms where the syllabus was rushed remained the most influential parameters. Engineer Lazaro says normal system where he means correct areas, always toppings exams, and widespread rumors of exam leakage should be investigated by independent relevant authorities. Top candidates' performance at university level should be also scrutinized. Brian Chemo says delays in results raises concerns about the effectiveness of the education system. The prolonged wait for results adds an additional layer of frustration for both students and educators. Leonard Masikabi says the main cause for this decimal performance in the KCSE exams is the teachers' deficit in schools, particularly sub-county schools. Delay by the government in remitting funds to the schools is another challenge. Don't expect results when schools are poorly funded. Godi Barasa says the government has a core responsibility of correctly remunerating the teaching fraternity. Teachers are responsible for enlightening the nation, and the least we can do as citizens is to look out for their welfare. That's what you were saying before I take the final 30 seconds each comment here. This is from... Still, he had a lengthy response to this debate. That is Honorable Nabi Nabwera. On one, he said, how are the quality of the grade A's that were registered? What are A's? Why are A's a preserve of national and extra county schools? How feasible and rational is it that the schools will emerge from nowhere to top, notwithstanding the entry behavior of students? Is 48,000 E's an indictment of the failure of the Quality Assurance Standards Department at the Ministry of Education in supervising curriculum delivery? Or is it an indication, he says, of the discriminatory manner we have invested in infrastructure, facilities, and teachers in the country? How will an E student be admitted to TVET, he asks, and he or she expected to be learning in a situation where we have a shortage of instructors who would otherwise give extra hours to such student who can't read and learn on his or her own? Final comments, 30 seconds each.
Most of those things by Nabuel, I think he'll be dealing with them in the Education Committee now, and I think he'll have a chance to debate them out. But for me, I think capitation is very important. Of the comments that came out, there was the issue of capitation to schools. I'm very proud and happy that capitation was released 2 days ago. I want to believe that it will be total capitation, because we have been dealing with the issue of not sending the full amount of capitation to schools, and therefore the schools still suffering even when capitation has been sent. But I want to congratulate the government that it has done it fairly in time, because formally would have to come outside here to actually press for capitation to go to schools. Number two, the teachers who are in schools and are working under TSE as the interns, they are being paid 20,000 when all other interns in this country are being paid 25,000 shillings. I think we are calling out on Teacher Service Commission to actually, even as we look at their terms to go to PPP, to actually levelize the payment for those teachers.
Dr. Mugo?
Yeah, two things. One, education continues to be a sacrifice bed for many children. 40% have D and below. And we push them to an academic-only education when we knew very well that under the circumstances and the context, they wouldn't perform. And now we expect that they go to TVET and they end up in jobs. We have 4 million students yet in the old system, now all of them in secondary school, luckily. There are changes we can cause. We know employers and society is looking for other skills beyond academic. Values, life skills, problem solving and these other things that have come through CBC. So what can be changed, even if it's minimally, to enrich these 4 million students that are in secondary school, so that we prepare them better for what will come. And second, KCSE, I think let's not ignore the accountability mechanism in the education system. So even as we release KCSE, we know it will not be about schools and how children, who has won, but about where are the gaps in the education system and what are the quality issues that we must address to receive the learning outcomes that are needed.
Asante, yes,
having extensively discussed the KCSE, I wish, and even KCP, because we must wrap all of them together. And as Kenya Kwanza administration is the leadership that will superintend the implementation of education programs. And from its charter, its negotiations, its engagement that were led by the president himself, I can assure the Kenyan public, looking at all these changes, indicators of positive change, that Kenya Kwanza administration, led by the president himself, because we have a president who has the biggest focus in the education program. And if you look at the programs that have been implemented, it is what was committed in the charter, that the government will continue endeavoring to ensure that there is equitable quality education for all across all levels. And that investment in the inputs and the different areas for education, that is teacher investment, is work in progress, and it will bridge the total gap, and we shall retain well-supported, respected, and motivated teachers. And then number 2, quality of teaching and learning tools is an area that the government will continue investing in, including schools infrastructure. So I think Kenyans should openly and come in and join in participating in ensuring that education is delivered equitably, particularly when the discrimination has been removed, like categorization of school, and schools will remain closer to the households. And therefore, it is for all of us to ensure that the schools next to us are of good quality and particularly public. And therefore, our conversation in future, we see a better story, and next year when we sit here, there will be more convincing and better data. So we are headed in the right direction. I urge the men at the ministry not to look back, but to continue implementing these reforms. And the reforms from NEC to make examinations more friendly and to facilitate transition should be supported.
Thank you. Your time is all appreciated. Mwalimu Omboko Milemba, MP Ohio constituency and the national chairperson of the Kenya Union of Post-Primary Education Teachers, thank you. We'll invite you again at the appropriate time to discuss about this timely matter and very extensive topic, which is education informs many things.
Thank you.
Dr. John Mugo, the Executive Director of Zizi Afrique, thank you for your time as well and the input, and Happy New Year to you too. And also Honorable Wilson Sosion, former NAT Secretary General and also former nominated Member of Parliament. Your time is all appreciated, gentlemen, and Happy New Year to you. And thanks to you too for waking up with us here on the broadcast and making time for the show, and of course to the views that you have sent on our X handle at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. The hashtag was Daybreak, and we'll see you tomorrow morning here at the same time. Thanks for watching. Till then, good morning.